Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stabinsky. On today's episode, I sit down with Brittney Cook, co-founder of Something Sweet, a frozen dessert brand built around pre-portioned, ready-to-bake brown butter cookie dough. In this conversation, we talk about what it looked like to turn a family recipe into a real CPG business with no prior food background. We get into the challenges of scaling something as technical as brown butter without losing what made the product special, and why Something Sweet chose to build around frozen dough rather than refrigerated or pre-baked cookies. We also discuss the realities of shipping a frozen product D2C, breaking into retail from scratch, why velocity matters more than just piling up doors, and how the team has tried to stay disciplined around growth, distribution, and SKU expansion as the business has scaled. I really enjoyed my conversation with Brittney, and I hope you do too. Brittney, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. If you wouldn't mind just starting with a brief background on yourself, that would be great.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat. My name is Brittney. I'm one of the co-founders and CEOs of Something Sweet. We make and sell a frozen, pre-portioned, ready-to-bake brown butter cookie dough that is sold nationwide.
Talk to me a bit about what your background looked like prior to launching the brand.
Absolutely. I mean, we do not come from, so it's run by my mom's sisters and I, and we did not have any CPG background with food. My mom was actually in the pet consumer goods space, but specifically me, I've been in sales, marketing, a little bit of everything. And we have really put ourselves through CPG school to really understand and to build and grow our business.
Talk to me a little bit about what, let's say, the days, weeks, months leading up to launching Something Sweet looked like and what ultimately compelled you to start the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So our founding story is really our everything. This is what drives us every single day. And there's a lot of meaning behind our cookies. A lot of people just think it's just a cookie company, but really there's a big foundation behind what we're doing. So back in November of 2021, we actually unexpectedly lost my dad. And shortly after he passed, my mom's sisters and I really experienced a lot of grief and loss in a very short amount of time. And if it was really a moment in our lives of reflection and a reminder of how short life is. And we decided to kind of put our heads together. I had this idea. My mom always grew up baking for us, and my dad always encouraged her to do something with her baked goods, and the time never felt right. And my dad's favorite cookie was the brown butter chocolate chip. I've always been fascinated with CPG in the product space. If anyone knows me, they know that I love grocery stores. One of my free time hobbies is literally walking the aisles of grocery stores. And I knew that there was a white space in the frozen dessert set. And we grew up with frozen dough in our freezer. My dad and I would always banter about the different ideas of what we can build and do as a family, but the time never felt right. And this was the moment. It was like this light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh, we should do something with my mom's frozen dough. And my dad's favorite was the brown butter chocolate chip. And really it all came together very quickly. And in a very short amount of time, right before his 1-year anniversary of his passing, we had basically decided to sell the frozen dough. So we learned how to scale the recipe. We started hand scooping. We created a packaging, logo, all the above, and launched Something Sweet on the 1-year anniversary with my dad's favorite treat. And so we literally started driving around with coolers and ice chests in our car and hand delivering. And from there, have grown Something Sweet into a beautiful business.
Yeah, it's a really touching story. We had talked about it previously, and I appreciate you being so open and willing to talk about it. I'm particularly interested in hearing about what those first deliveries looked like. So you decide, okay, we're going to do something with this, and you start hand scooping. What did it look like to drive around with frozen dough and actually sell it?
Honestly, I feel like looking back, there's so much of that time that was a blur. And I truly don't even know how we figured all this out in a very short amount of time. And I'm talking like we put this business together and soft launched it in a matter of, I believe it was less than like 5 months with no prior experience. But what we did was we started with the Google search bar, looked up how to make a packaging product, looked up commercial kitchens of like, where do we start there? We took my mom's KitchenAid recipe and Googled how to scale a recipe and had a lot of tweaking there, and also learned how to like bulk brown butter, which was insane. What we did was we set up a website and put the opportunity for local delivery, and posted in literally next door Facebook groups and got our first set of like local orders. And then, we transitioned to the farmer's market and, did that type of path in the initial stages. But it actually wasn't long before we even started shipping nationwide.
Something you touched on that we should dig into is scaling a recipe from, mom's famous homemade chocolate chip cookies to something that can actually be manufactured at a scale where you're delivering, cookies nationwide.
Mhm.
What did you have to sacrifice, if anything, in the original recipe? And what did it look like to modify the recipe and iterate so that you could scale it? What didn't work with the original recipe,
Yeah.
let's say?
To be honest, we actually haven't changed the recipe too drastically, actually, from the very beginning. We use the same ingredients, actually, as the early days. We just kind of, throughout these phases of growing our business, we've just learned how to source and get ingredients that was more bulk and attainable for scale. But it's actually very surprising. We actually have not altered the recipe that much. Yeah.
That is really surprising to
Hmm.
hear. I'd like to spend some time talking about brown butter
Hmm.
as well,
Yeah.
because that's integral to your cookies.
Hmm.
It's a huge differentiating factor.
Yeah.
For listeners who don't know what brown butter actually is or how it's made, maybe they heard of it, maybe they haven't, but can you just explain briefly what brown butter is and we can
Yeah.
go from there?
Yeah. Absolutely. That is like my favorite question of all time. And we pride ourselves in brown butter. And not all brown butter is created equal. So essentially, brown butter is, I like to explain it in the most like digestible form for consumers, is when you cook butter down, you have a separation of what's called ghee, the clarified butter. And at the bottom, you have the milk solids that separate from the ghee, and those milk solids caramelize. So it gives it that caramel nutty flavor. So when you combine all of it after it's cooked down, you get this intense, rich flavor from the brown butter without using any artificial flavors or anything like that. But you get an intensified, delicious flavor. But not all brown butter is created equal. Brown butter is a very technical butter. You can cook it way too long, which will give it a bitter taste. And actually, a lot of that type of brown butter is used in a lot of like savory dishes. Brown butter can be used in savory and sweet. But for us specifically, we are down to the temperature. It also depends on what type of butter, how much fat content you have in it. There's a lot of factors in brown butter, but we pride ourselves in having a very flavor packed brown butter that you can taste in each of our cookies. And we also enhance the brown butter flavor in our cookies through our ingredients as well.
What did it look like to scale such a technical ingredient and to actually create consistency in the flavor? I imagine that's a really difficult thing to do in practice. What did that look like?
Yeah. It was such a learning curve for us. A lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, and also dialing in the very specific, down to the granular temperature of the brown butter and also the look of it. And there's so many technical details, but it was a lot of trial and error.
What did it look like to find a co-manufacturer in the early days? Was that a struggle?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely brought its challenges. That was a transition for us to go from hand scooping to our first manufacturer. Our brown butter manufacturer is separate than our cookie manufacturer, and that has also been a learning curve too.
Yeah, talk to me about that as well.
Yeah, so we have a separate manufacturer that does our brown butter. We have found that that's just the best way, scalability wise, for our business, and also just to diversify as we scale in our production lines. But that was an intentional choice just based off of learning through the co manufacturing experience.
Did you find a brown butter specialist or did you find somebody with the right butter and then teach them precisely what you wanted?
We were introduced from a friend of a friend of a friend in the industry, and we're able to do something very special and unique that is specialized to us in our process, but is not offered to all. So we do it very specific. Yeah.
So it sounds like a bit of both,
Yeah.
if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Before we get into the sort of early scaling days, something else I wanted to touch on is this decision to focus on frozen dough specifically. You mentioned that the frozen dessert space was kind of boring. There's a lot being left on the table there. You mentioned growing up with frozen dough around. What, I guess, beyond those two factors led you to think that selling frozen dough specifically was the right approach? And did you consider at any point selling pre-made cookies, for example? Why frozen? Because I want to get into the complexity that selling a frozen product introduces. And so I'm curious what you saw as the pros early on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, in the grocery store as a whole, I think unless you're totally reinventing the wheel, there's not a ton of white space per se. But in the frozen dessert set specifically, and I challenge every single person that I talk to about this specific conversation, go to your local grocery store and go to the frozen dessert section, or actually ask yourself the question of when was the last time you went to the frozen dessert section? Most people are going to say probably Thanksgiving, right? Or, they never go to that section. It's owned by legacy brands, which it's not a problem, but a lot of consumers don't. That's not something that's not top of mind in their path in the grocery store that they are dying to go to. So those are two key things actually that was a driving component of our thought process behind going into the frozen dessert set. Just beyond that, there's so much opportunity and innovation that is so ripe and still so early that is exciting to consumers and also us building within that set. There's so much opportunity, and we have driven customers to that frozen dessert set, whereas before they wouldn't have. There's a lot too that I can talk about with why we chose frozen dough compared to even refrigerated.
Yeah, why frozen versus refrigerated?
With refrigerated dough, some of the key things that were annoying to me was once I opened a pack of the refrigerated dough, I couldn't reseal it. So you felt like you had to bake the whole thing. And then that also frustrated me because I didn't want to have a plate of cookies sitting there, and I didn't want to feel like I had to eat them right away, or I would have to secondary reseal it. So I'd have to take a Ziploc bag and put the dough in there. Also, we didn't, grow up eating that because the quality was never there. The quality of the ingredients, I'd rather make it from scratch, but I never had the time to make it from scratch. So we took a lot of those frustrations from the refrigerated set and really tried to customize and make solutions in the frozen dessert set. So for us specifically, we do a resealable pouch. So it allows customers the freedom to bake one or more at a time at home. When we produce our cookie dough, it's literally produced and then we flash freeze it and it stays frozen until you bake it at home. So literally, a customer is getting the freshest baked experience. Also, we cut out any preservatives or additives or anything like that. So you're genuinely getting the closest to homemade tasting cookie as you can get, but also just the convenience of it. The other key frustrating thing and difference is with the refrigerated dough, it's literally just like a brick of cookie dough. And yes, it's lightly kind of scored, but for us, we do actual pre-portioned dough pucks. So you can literally bake one cookie, or you can bake the whole bag if you want, or as many as you want, and then you can reseal it and put it back into the freezer. And I could even go on even more, but so many reasons.
It makes total sense. So, you're graduating from the farmer's market and you're starting to ship nationwide. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're shipping frozen dough D2C.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting choice to me that a lot of founders are not making. They're choosing to forego having a D2C arm of their business because shipping frozen goods is quite complex. Talk to me about what the earliest days of shipping nationwide looked like. What does it take to ship a frozen product like yours? And how have things changed over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So frozen shipping is not cheap. And here are the reasons why. We have to ship with a box, an insulated cooler, dry ice packs, and then our product. We have a short shipping window, which is like Monday to Wednesday, and you have to do about 2 day, 3 day to be able to get it there frozen to your doorstep. So, a lot of complexities with shipping frozen, but our main goal, and it continues to be, is to make our cookies accessible to people. And it is very costly. The margins are not extreme, obviously, in shipping frozen, but to us, it was well worth every D2C shipment because it got cookies in people's hands. And as we continue to grow and scale and become more accessible to consumers, the decision to, start with D2C has proven beneficial because customers now who ordered, let's say in Florida, will be able to buy our cookies in our store. We have a loyal customer base, and it's definitely been a challenging one, very costly one, but well worth it for us, the investment into our customers.
Yeah. It costs, I believe, like $17 as a consumer if I were to order something sweet online. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that roughly what it costs you to ship the product?
No, so we still absorb. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're taking a loss on the D2C part of your business.
So we have, depending on the bundles, I mean, it varies. Our margin varies. Most people think like, at the cost that we're charging that we're making a killing off of it. But actually, we don't even charge the consumer how much it costs to ship it. So we were very intentional. Obviously, we're not trying to put ourselves out of business, but, we've calculated the risk and also the investment in that, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate the transparency. As you started to ship nationwide, what did your repeat customer rate look like in the earliest days? I'm curious how that's changed over time as you've expanded into retail, because I could actually see that dropping substantially because your retail footprint has exploded. So I'm curious what the early repeat customer rates look like, and then, yeah, what's happened subsequently as you've expanded into
Yeah,
retail.
absolutely. So we have a very loyal customer base. And actually, our returning customer rate, basically since day one, has been extremely high. We've tried to stay really closely connected to our customers. And it is showing through because customers are now switching from, D2C and ordering it there to then now purchasing it in stores. So we're, shifting away from our D2C, but even on a small scale, our returning customer rate is extremely high.
In the earliest days, when you've again just graduated from the farmer's market and you're starting to ship nationwide, how are people finding out about the product?
My sisters and I have actually done our social media from day one, and we knew that it was a huge priority. Are we amazing at it? No, but we show up every single week and we give it our best. And that's the most organic way that we've been able to reach customers on a granular level. We've been very fortunate throughout our time of building our business that we've had amazing influencers who have shared our product organically without being paid. And that's brought a lot of our customer base and visibility for our brand, but also, continually showing up in any way possible from small events to literal next door groups, like any type of way that we can build brand awareness and gain customers, we do that. Once we kind of graduated away from farmers market and even D2C and we kind of shifted to retail, we are incredibly huge about demos. That's also built a customer base because they're able to try our cookies. We've done hundreds of demos all throughout our stores to be able to gain customer bases. And we are still learning to this day how to reach customers, how to build our brand awareness, and build repeat and trial.
What did it look like to land your first door? What did breaking into retail look like?
I'm incredibly stubborn and I have an intense amount of grit, so I wanted it. Our local first retailer was Nugget. And I was actually sitting at the farmer's market and I was Googling on LinkedIn, and my mom had a friend who knew a contact of a friend at Nugget and cold emailed him. And then if he didn't reply, within 2 weeks, I sent a kind, follow up. Kept doing that for a long time, actually. And then he finally reached back out, and my mom and I got a meeting at the headquarters. And from there, we got our first retail account, which was Nugget Market. They're incredible. They're local to the Northern California region. They've been amazing partners, especially for us. We had never been in retail before, so there was a lot of learning curves, but they were our first.
For somebody who has never pitched a product in a retail environment in that way, walk me through what that actually looks like behind the scenes. What did that meeting look like?
Usually, honestly, the first meeting is just the start. It's more so after the follow up and the continual process that that brings as well. The initial meeting was one to pitch our product, pitch ourselves. And even at that point, we didn't even technically have a retail pack of the bag yet. So we were really pitching something that wasn't even necessarily there. So in those type of meetings, we sat down with our buyer at a round table and presented. We presented ourselves, our story, our product. Really, it's your opportunity to be able to sell the buyer on why it would be a good fit for their market and, build a confidence in them that it's worth the risk because it's a risk to them to be bringing in a new product. It's not always an immediate yes. That first meeting is usually just the start. But with that Nugget meeting, we got the yes on spot. And from there, it's like a ton of paperwork people don't realize, a ton of planning and onboarding, and there's a lot of admin side of launching in a new retailer.
Yeah, what did you immediately like? What were the immediate next steps then? If you had never been in retail before, what ducks did you need to get in a row in order to actually be able to land the product at the store?
So much. Looking back, we had to find a distributor that was willing to take us on. We had to build out our whole pricing strategy. And at that time, there was no frozen dough in the, frozen set. So we really had to set the standard ourselves. And then learning how to, create a retail pack. It was a lot. And we did it in still a very short amount of time, but it was a huge learning curve. You have to do distribution, make sure your, margins are right, their margins are in line, promos, onboarding paperwork, just onboarding with a distributor is big.
From fall 2023 till now, you have scaled from, I don't know if it was one specific Nugget location or several, but let's just call it a handful of Nugget locations to hundreds of doors, which is remarkable. Walk me through what it looked like to scale that quickly and what broke down in the system along the way. You can't go from single digit doors to triple digit doors overnight. So, what needed to change? And then, yeah, what broke down?
For us, since even day one, we've been super strategic about having compound growth because in CPG specifically, we have talked to many founders, advisors who have told us about the horror stories of scaling even too quickly with larger key accounts. And for us, we wanted to be super strategic and strategic meaning growth, but at a little bit of a slower pace. To be healthy in our business, especially with us not being seasoned CPG builders. So we started with our first key account, which was Nugget. From there, we started going into key independent accounts throughout the Bay Area and adding those. And every single step of the way, we have learned every single sales process of our business, how to work with the sales teams, with the distributors, how to, set the right SRP, promo strategy. It's been super strategic, very strategic from day one. We're sitting at a little over 300 stores right now. We're about to double that in the next week, 2 weeks, but we're ready and we don't go after opportunities that we're not ready for and that we know that we can't support or do. We've done it at a pace that's been very comfortable to us, and we haven't chased a million doors. We've supported every door that we've gone into and that we get into, which I think is very important because I know as a founder, you get these large, shiny opportunities, which sounds amazing, but the most valuable thing that we have had as a business has been the time to learn our business and our sales process.
I'm just curious for a sense of scale to go from 300, let's say, to 600 over the course of the next week or so. Is that just cranking up a dial somewhere? Like, what needs to change? And even to go from just to double in that way, like, what does it actually look like under the hood? What needs to change in the system?
Yeah, so larger distribution. So for those who aren't aware, there's two large distributors, KEHI or UNFI. Those are the largest distributors in the United States who service all of your favorite larger key accounts. That was our kind of next step outside of the initial independent stores and Nugget. Growing our distribution was a learning curve for sure. Getting into the big, what's called the big dogs of distribution, and learning that. Also, making sure that our manufacturer had a solid foundation. But from the moment we started this business, we've been altering things in our processes and flows to be able to keep adding scale. So it's little things that add up and that you feel as a business owner, that you see the cracks in processes. And for us, it was adding that distribution, though. That was definitely a learning curve.
Something you've talked about elsewhere is the importance of velocity and not just focusing on number of doors, but the actual velocity. And for listeners, and that's a term that's come up on the show before, and I don't think I've actually like set aside time to explain what that is. So for listeners who don't know what velocity entails, do you mind just before we get into it explaining what that is?
Yeah. So velocity is essentially how many bags per store per week our customers buying. That's used by multiple parties on the back end. So for us, we use it to be able to sell to new retailers to show them that, hey, customers are buying our product and it's moving and it's well received. On the retailer side, for the retail buyer side, you're building the confidence that the risk that they took is paying off and that it's adding to their category dollars within their set of the grocery store that they manage.
Generally speaking, is there a number that you're trying to target? Are you monitoring this number day to day? Are you looking at it day to day, week to week, but really actioning on it month to month? I'm curious how you actually look at that number in practice, and then what sort of tactics, maybe beyond promo, you might use to improve velocity in instances where you're not seeing the results that you're going after.
For us, I mean, I'm looking at the sales data weekly. It depends on the retailer and what they offer, but if anything, it's monthly, but on a weekly basis. We have a specific number in place, but also kind of going back to the original of like the white space in a growing category, there's still not as many solid, data points from other brands, necessarily competitors, that there's like a standard yet. You have like maybe a granola bar set, and there's legacy brands that have been there a while, and you kind of have an average of like the velocity that should be sold per store per week. For us, we're still building that out, but we have our targets for sure of like weekly basis. If we have a store that, is not hitting those specific numbers, what we do is we talk to the buyer specifically and we put plans in place. Every retailer does things so different. And that can be putting in a lower price, everyday low price in EDLP. That can be doing a specific promo that you're adding into the quarterly promotion schedule. They have ads that they want you to do. But specifically for us, we promote heavily on social media through different marketing efforts. But every retailer is very different. So you have to have a kind of tailored approach.
You've also been really thoughtful and shown a lot of restraint around SKU introduction. You only have 3 SKUs. You could have 20, I assume. And I'm interested to hear more about, I mean, I know why you launched with the brown butter chocolate chip cookie, but I'm interested to hear more about how you decided to launch each of the next 2 SKUs, specifically why those particular cookies and why that timing for each of them made sense, and how you think about SKU expansion at this point in time when you are scaling again fairly rapidly.
Well, first off, we only started with one and we had one for basically a little over like a year and a half. We wanted to do it and do it right. You can cannibalize your business and your brand very quickly if you're trying to be everything for everyone. And also, you're trying to have a million products from the get go. So, from the very beginning, we were very strategic about doing it and doing it right. But also, a key thing for our business that we have really honed in on is listening to our customers. Our second 2 SKUs after the first initial brown butter chocolate chip, those were customer requests. Our customers told us what they wanted. And then really what we did was we brought our customers into it and sent them samples and involved them in the process of like, do you like this? Do you not like this? So really our customers have guided our flavor profiles there. And Obviously, we're excited and we have flavor profiles that we're working on. But like I said, we've been super laser focused about doing it and doing it right, and then listening to our customers about what works and what doesn't.
Are you testing the fourth or fifth SKU currently?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
I'm excited to hear what that might be maybe
Yeah.
after the call.
Yes.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm interested to hear a bit about how you view the competitive landscape. I know that the frozen dessert space has been kind of boring historically, but there's been some acquisitions in the space, and it does seem like there is competition,
Mhm.
and it seems like maybe competition is getting a little bit stiffer over time. So on one hand, that might be validation, but on the other hand, that's a little bit concerning. I guess you can't really have one without the other. So anyway, I'm curious to hear more about how you think about the competitive landscape beyond brown butter, maybe as your core differentiating factor. What else you think about in terms of creating a defensible moat for the business?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, my thought process behind competitors is that competitors build a category, and every single category of a grocery store has competitors. We definitely have competitors in our space, but there are so many things that I can say that differentiate ourselves. There is so much meaning behind what we do and the, story around how we are building this, but also our flavor profiles of our cookies are, uncomparable. And we know that our customers, once they try our cookies, we have very loyal customers who, support our brand and connect. And also, everyone experiences grief, and there's a lot of connection between that, but also we just have really freaking good cookies.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to the founders of Bitem,
Hmm.
the brownie bite company recently, and we joked a bit about the idea of just delicious brownies being a differentiating factor, but it's
Yeah.
true. And there's something sort of beautiful in having part of your defensibility or part of your differentiation just be the flavor profile, the
Yes.
actual product is just simply superior to what else is on the shelf. But what I think is interesting, or what I think sort of goes unsaid there, if you don't dig in a little bit deeper, is there's so much that goes on in packaging. And we talked a bit about this too on that episode, which again, if you're interested in the dessert space, I recommend that for listeners as well. But the importance of packaging
Hmm.
when that's really all customers have to go off of when they're making a decision in store. And there's so much meaning behind your story, but if I have never heard of you, for example, and I'm in the store and I'm just looking for cookies, all I have to go off of is, does this look appealing? And so there is something about packaging that I think has to be talked about as well.
In terms of packaging and branding as a whole, our biggest investment in the early days was our branding and packaging because we knew as a consumer ourselves that is what drives new trial and credibility with brands is having good branding and packaging. And also ours has a lot of hidden meaning that customers wouldn't necessarily know right off the bat, but it also drives a nostalgic, comforting feeling that we try to evoke with our packaging.
So, as you think about differentiation and competition, you've sort of stayed true to this idea of delicious cookies being the defensible aspect of your business. And you've deliberately chosen not to go down the better for you route, right? These are premium ingredients, but this is not a better for you cookie. This is an indulgent cookie. This is just a delicious treat. It's working for you. The world loves traditional, delicious cookies, but there are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of consumers out there who care very deeply about better for you. Expanding your product line and just introducing another, let's say, another flavor in the same sort of vein as what you already offer could easily cannibalize sales. But introducing something with no refined sugar, for example, might bring in a whole swath of new customers that might be extremely health conscious, for example. So there's obviously a lot that goes into formulation, but I am curious to hear more about how you think about being a deliberately not better for you product today, and if you see that evolving over time, or if that is your lane and you're sticking with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we technically consider ourselves like better for you. in the sense that we do simple pantry style ingredients. So there's no added oils, preservatives, artificial flavors. Are we healthy? No, we don't try to be. And from the very beginning, we have not tried to be something that we're not. We are an indulgent sweet treat, and we use real butter, sugar, eggs. That has been our since day one. Now, as our brand evolves, I say never, but based on customer feedback and just how our initial 3 SKUs in brand has been well received by customers, this is something that we're sticking in our lane and we're laser focused on, because there are amazing brands who do the low sugar, low fat, low carb, no gluten products. And if that's what you're looking for, then we're not that for you. I think as a brand, it's very important for you to also know who you're for and who you're not for, and to try to not be something that you're not. We're not trying to be low sugar, low carb, low fat, keto. Like, that is not what we're building. And there's a lot of reason behind that. There's something very interesting about the retail landscape that I find. As a consumer myself, I couldn't find something that was an indulgence that was as close to homemade tasting as you can get. Do I make cookies from scratch myself? Yeah. And could I? Absolutely. But when you're in a pinch and you want something sweet that's homemade tasting, that has simple ingredients and that tastes homemade and indulgent, we want to offer that to customers. And we've heard so many customers time and time again through hundreds of demos and customer feedback that that's what they're craving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. It does feel like you kind of have to pick your lane. I mean, I'm sure there's examples out there that I'm not thinking of, but I don't see a lot of brands trying to cross over into both worlds. And I think that's probably deliberate for the reasons you just said.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If you could go back and give yourself one particular piece of advice when you started, what would it be? And I think this is a particularly interesting question because you did not have a background in the CPG world. And so as an outsider, what might you tell somebody who is thinking of starting their own CPG brand?
Yeah, absolutely. The fear that comes about when you're doing something new is paralyzing, absolutely paralyzing. But I think that on the other side of fear is everything that you've ever wanted. That's something that I've learned, that I'm still learning, and I still have to repeat to myself. If it didn't scare you, it means that you weren't dreaming big enough. Everything is figure outable, and I know that's not grammatically correct, but there's always ways to make it work, to work through it, to figure it out, and you're going to be scared, but that's part of the process.
What's something you've changed your mind about since starting Something Sweet?
I have massive respect for every single product that is on the grocery store shelf. You don't really realize it as a consumer, but being a founder, building within the grocery store is so freaking hard. That is something I've changed my mind about. People don't realize it, and I have a lot of respect for so many who are doing it and have done it.
Yeah, likewise. It's been very eye-opening for me to start the show and to just get into all the details and, all of the work that goes on behind the scenes. And even as somebody who generally, I'd like to think, appreciates how grueling it is to start something up, it is so much more than I even could have pictured. So I'm right there with you. I think we have time for one more question. Where do you see Something Sweet 3 to 5 years from now?
We are building ourselves to be a household name for consumers around the country. Think about your legacy brands that have been around for many years, the Betty Crockers and all of that. We are building a dessert brand that everyone will know and that we'll have in the house.
Amazing. I'm so excited to follow along. Brittney, thank you so much for the time. If you want to share with listeners where they can find Something Sweet, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, so you can check our store locator at Something Sweet Dough. We are actually launching nationwide in select Whole Foods Market stores as we speak, and we're excited for you to find us in your local frozen dessert set.
Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's debrief. I thought this was a really good example of how much hidden complexity can sit behind an everyday grocery product. On the surface, Something Sweet is selling cookie dough, but underneath is recipe scaling, brown butter production, frozen logistics, distribution strategy, retail onboarding, promo planning, and the constant pressure to drive velocity once you actually get on shelf. Something that stood out to me during our conversation is just how disciplined the team has been. They didn't try to launch a huge product line right away, and they've been intentional about growing at a pace they can actually support. I also thought Brittney's point around frozen as a format was particularly interesting. It wasn't just a branding choice. It solved very specific customer frustrations around freshness, portioning, and resealability. And more broadly, I think this episode is a good reminder that a lot of the products we take for granted in stores are just much harder to build than they appear to be from the outside looking in. I learned a lot during my conversation with Brittney, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you haven't already, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.